Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Therese, for that reminder. You know, last week I mentioned something about terms of agreement that, we don't look at every time we download an app or whatever, it's like, yeah, whatever. And so I'm just wondering if when you sign the contract to have a human experience, if you looked at the terms of agreement carefully or not. Because, there are times when things get a little difficult and testy, and it's in there, trust me, if you go find your contract, it's in there. And so today's lesson is part 2 of a series that I did on the 4 agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. And a short review from last week is that the book is based on ancient Toltec wisdom, we are told. And that the Toltec were an ancient society that came together for the sake of preserving the wisdom of the ancients, we are told, thousands of years ago in southern Mexico. And in the words of the book, the 4 Agreements says that they reveal the source of self-limiting beliefs that rob us of joy and create needless suffering. That's the clue to the whole thing, that we create a lot of the drama that happens in our lives. The book offers a very powerful code, it says, of conduct that can rapidly transform our lives into a new experience of freedom, true happiness, and love. The 4 agreements are, to repeat, be impeccable with your word, don't take anything personally. Oh, that's a good one. Don't make assumptions, and always do your best. Last week I shared the first 2 and the introduction to the book. Today I will cover the last 2 and a little summary. So, number 3, don't make assumptions. Right from the beginning, we are told that the problem with making assumptions is that we tend to believe that they are true. And they, as a result, create a vicious cycle of unneeded misery in our lives. The cycle goes something like this. You make an assumption about what somebody said or did, you take it personally, then you blame the person because nothing is our fault, of course, we all know that, and then you react to the assumption you made by sending out all this negativity with your words. When we make assumptions, we are asking for problems, and we all do it. We all do it. You just be honest with yourself, we all do it. We make an assumption, we believe it, we add fuel to the fire. Before you know it, it's out of control, and it usually has no basis in reality other than the misery that it causes you. All self-made up. I call this sin, self-imposed nonsense. And the point is, we tend to be our own worst enemy. According to the book, all the sadness, most of the sadness and the drama that has been in your life was created because you took things personally and you made assumptions. So if we take a moment to consider the truth in this, we become aware of just how true this really is. And becoming aware of the problem, as Therese said, is part of the first step. When you catch yourself saying, all right, I took it personally, that's true, or I made an assumption. And let's consider a practical example, for example, of making an assumption based on a relationship. Now, what could go possibly wrong making an assumption about a relationship? Nothing, of course. And we make the mistake that our partner knows what we're thinking and what we're feeling, so we don't go through the process of actually expressing that. And so what happens? When something goes wrong, what do you come up with? You should have known. You should have known. Yeah, you should have said something. Another assumption that goes wrong is when we get married and we have the idea that our partner sees marriage in the same way that we do. And that one doesn't take long to figure out either. These things, they really don't. So we just don't share. We don't communicate. And again, it becomes a vicious cycle. And it's all about making assumptions. We make all sorts of assumptions because we don't have the courage to be clear about our feelings and our words. And it reminds us, the book reminds us that true love is accepting your partner as they are. Now, does that mean that they don't need to change, or they need changing, or that we need changing? No, because in truth, we're always changing. But the point is, the change has to come from within, from the person, not you trying to change the person. That never works out. We end up resenting them because they don't accept us for who we are, or vice versa. And what about a perspective of religion and politics? How does that work out real good? We think, everybody thinks that they should see things the way I see things. What's the problem here? I mean, obviously I know what I'm talking about. You know, it's just, it goes on that way. We think that we have the right way of doing things. And religion and politics are totally about this. And the point of these agreements is to try to break this vicious cycle that we create for ourselves. So it says, when we stop making assumptions, we will communicate clearly, free from emotional poison. With clear communication, our relationships will change. According to the book, this is the goal of the Toltec. It is a way to personal freedom based on our choices and what we do. Now, last week I challenged you to catch yourself every time that you take something personally. So add to that this week, catch yourselves when you make an assumption about something. Happens, trust me, if you start writing them down, you're going to say, boy, this list is pretty long, because we do it so much. And there's just no point in it. So that brings me to agreement number 4. Always do your best. It says the last agreement is the one that allows the other 3 to become deeply ingrained habits. The thing to remember about always doing your best is that your best is relative, meaning you are always improving and you're always getting better at it. But nevertheless, at any given point in time, do your best. So we are always doing our best. So doing your best is taking the action because you realize, you come to the realization that this is what you need to do. So that's what you do. Here's what the author says about doing your best. Don't expect that you will always be able to be impeccable with your word. Your routine habits are too strong and firmly rooted in your mind, but you can do your best. Don't expect that you will never take anything personally. Just do your best. Don't expect that you will never make another assumption, but you can always do your best. So what is he saying? Keep after it. Don't give up. That's why we're here. It is a practice. And that's why we do all these practices on Sunday morning, because the idea is to get you to be aware of these and develop these practices. Not just Sunday morning for 45 minutes or whatever it is that we're here, but every day when you go to the HEB. And or drive down the freeway. She didn't bring up that one. That's a really good one. Oh, boy, that'll test you. That's the master class? Okay. Yeah. I know I haven't graduated from yet. Yeah. I'm still taking, I have to go to summer school on that one, I guess. Yeah. So, and I always use the analogy of a musical instrument, because how do you master a musical instrument? Repetition. Practice, practice, practice. Exactly. How do you get to Carnegie Hall? Practice, practice, practice. So the book tells us that when we honor these 4 agreements, there is no way we can live anything other than a good life. And they're very simple. They really are. And spirituality comes down to simplicity. The simpler we make it, the easier it is to do. We tend to overcomplicate things. We tend to over-dramatize things. And these kind of books are reminders to us that we know this inside. We just do. But we need reminders because, we're playing the ego game now and then. And that's not very helpful. The agreements, it says, are a summary of the mastery of transformation, breaking those old agreements. The book talks about being stuck in a system where there's laws and a big judge, it says, and we're the victims of this whole thing. And we have to free ourselves from this. They call it the parasite. the book. Everybody has a different way of explaining it. But the Toltec said, they called it the parasite, that vicious cycle that we're in. And the idea, the Toltecs say that to become free, where there are no leaders and no followers, you are your own. That sounds a whole lot like unity, where you are your own master and you are your own captain of your own ship and you live your own lives. So there are 3 masteries according to the Toltec. The first one is a mastery of awareness, what we've been talking about. That's the first step. You realize that you need to work on this. That's step number 1. And then it says the second step is the mystery of transformation. This is about how to change and be free from the domestication of the planet they refer to in the first half of the book. And the third is the mastery of intent. This is what it says. It says, intent from the Toltec point of view is that part of life that makes transformation of energy possible. It is one living being that seamlessly encompasses all energy, that oneness. So it's an entire map for the Toltec to get us out of this system, this parasite. And he said there's one of 3 ways that this can be done. The first one, is, they say, is to attack it head to head, so one problem at a time. He said you can do it, but that's the long way of doing it. The second is to stop feeding it. Stop doing it. And the third is interesting. It's called the initiation of the dead. The initiation of the dead can be found in almost all traditions. It is a symbolic death that kills the parasite, according to the Toltec. Sounds very familiar. And says this is the fastest way to do it, but it's the most difficult. To me, I hear that as the classic crucifixion story in Christianity. You know, that metaphysically, the crucifixion was to eliminate, or that's an interesting point, the ego, to get rid of the ego. Now, I question sometimes whether the annihilation of the ego is the goal, because if we are truly tripartite in nature, as God is, that we have, mind, idea, expression, then we're like a stool with 3 legs, and to get rid of one leg, well, it just seems like, well, we're not going to be very balanced. But that's just I always refer to the classic Moody Blues album from the 70s. It's a question of balance. I like that approach. And for me, it's more about putting the human side of you in its place as servant, if you will, and not the master, as effect and not the cause. So, and that's just a thought from me. It ends the book with what they call the new dream, heaven on earth. And there we go again. And I said that last week. It's always repeating. All the stories, all the traditions, all repeat the same thing. This journey that we took on. And the parable of the prodigal son says it in summary. Where we took off to the foreign land and we made a mess of things. And eventually we come to the realization is that I don't need to be doing this. It's a mess. My father's the king. Everything he has, I have. It's like I'm the king too. What am I doing? Feeding swine. And he comes to the realization and he comes back home. So that's what they talk about, the new dream of always doing that. So right now, I want you to start replacing, can I have a little music there? I want you to start to replace the idea that we have formed in our minds about our way of addressing situations. Whether we come from that emotional side of the human side, or whether we come from the spiritual side when something takes place. So I invite you just to take a couple of deep breaths and make a conscious effort to be present in the here and now. In spirit, there is nothing else, because in truth, there is nothing else but the here and now. Today, we take the words of the ancient Toltec to heart to remind ourselves that it is we who are our own worst and, in fact, only enemy. This through the choices that we make. We are our own persecutors, and we are our own saviors. For it is written that with whatever judgment you judge, you shall be judged. That says to me that we judge ourselves. And how else can it be if we are created in the image and likeness of this oneness, and we have creative power, then it is you making your own choices of how you're going to live and what you're going to do. So we're reminded once again from the Toltec to be impeccable with our words, to not take anything personally, to not make assumptions, and to always do our best. And I challenge you to keep those 4 little things in mind all the time, and that every time one of them rears its ugly head, say, no, I'm not going to do that this time. I'm going to take the high road. I'm going to let the person in front of that wants to rush in front of me at the HEB or at the highway, just let him do that and say, bless you. Namaste, as Therese said. And so it is. So have a wonderful week.